look, there's always going to be competition for, streaming services. You referenced Amazon Prime and Netflix before. I think from a consumer point of view, if there was just one thing and it had everything, then that would be great. It would be the most convenient thing
Well,
ever. But
I'm not sure
it
Doesn't
about
work
that.
like that
loses.
though.
I'm not
No,
sure
it
about that though,
doesn't
actually.
work like that. But
Well,
hold on.
hmm,
From a console perspective, it loses its identity, doesn't it? And that's where I'm not so sure about I don't like the
well,
idea of everything just
no.
falling into one. It loses. It's hard to put your finger on it, but the magic kind of goes, I think, if that happens.
Well, what it also does is as well, if you just got one, and this applies to sort of the real world as well, really. If you've just got one thing controlling everything, that breeds corruption, and that breeds sort of complacency. And if everything was just on one thing eventually, that's what would worry me. That does that mean that they don't try anymore? Whereas if we've got competing things that have got competing games, that's good for the industry because it pushes people on. I mean, look, you only have to look at this generation. I mean, PlayStation have dominated it, and Microsoft have had to be user friendly and do these user friendly things. But if Xbox had been dominating, there's no way we would have seen as many user friendly things happen on the Xbox. Not a chance. And the same with the Switch, isn't it? The Switch has got all this goodwill now because it's come out and done things that people want because the Wii U failed so miserably, and they had to respond because people didn't like it. So I don't like this idea of in the future we'll just all be on one platform, and it just seems to me that it just breeds complacency, and it makes the people at the top complacent and thinking, well, everyone's no one's got a choice. You have to be on this platform, so screw you, sort of thing. If you want to be on it, you have to pay our ridiculous fees or whatever the case may be. Or
The one thing that always comes to
so,
mind when you talk about complacency when they're the only big boy in town sort of thing
mm,
is when you think to wrestling and you hear about the stories back in the day with WCW
yeah,
competing with WWE, the
well,
Monday
yeah,
Night Wars, how good it was, and then
it pushed things
WWE,
on.
look how
Yeah,
bad
it
it is
made
now,
WWE. Can you
or
imagine
can be.
Oh, I suppose we're going off on a bit of a tangent now with WWE talk, but can you imagine a scenario where WWE hadn't have been challenged by WCW? Because that brand before WCW came along was stagnating,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
people were stopping watching it. And you could argue WCW saved WWE, ironically,
Well, it
in a
gave
way.
them a kick up the
It gave
arse
them
that they
a yeah.
needed.
So that's the only thing I have against this whole idea of everything in one, because that I just don't think that's healthy for the future of gaming if everything's in
No.
one thing.
You want competition because,
You
like you
want
said,
competition at all times, yeah.
it brings the best games. Well,
Yeah.
it should do.
Well, look
Yeah.
at FIFA. I mean, we use that
Well,
example time and
yeah.
time and time again. I know Pro Evolution Soccer exists, but
Mm.
it doesn't challenge FIFA from a financial
Sales
perspective.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously the sales are representative of that. So when I say before about from a consumer point of view, it's great. Look, I would love the fact that if you could just have all these things in an ideal world in the same place, it's great because it's convenient. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea overall, right? Because, like you say, it leads to complacency. It leads to being forced down one single road.
Yeah.
And whilst in principle, hey, you can have all these things in the same place and you never really need to do anything else and it's all sort of in the palm of your hands. That's great. That's amazing. But in practice, when it comes to it, I don't think it'd ever really work as well as that, basically. I think there would always be the hoops that you've already mentioned that people would have to jump through. And
Hmm.
I think there has to be something that remains exclusive to brands. Otherwise that's what we end up with, really.
Well,
But
you
I think
said it
it's a
before.
really diverse topic, and I think everyone would have very different opinions on it.
Yeah, to be honest, I feel like with the future of gaming that this will become more apparent with the cross-platform. But I feel like you need to keep competition healthy because when you look at most things in life, I mean, phones, they pretty much do the same thing, but you got the iPhone and Samsung, so you got Androids and iOS, but they're always competing with each other. You even look like, I mean, as boring it is, like TV subscriptions, like to
Yeah.
watch football, Sky and BT. You always,
Oh,
you always have people, companies competing in a space, and I'd rather that stayed because I think it does provide healthy competition.
well, I mean, you bring up a good example with phones. Look what's happening at the minute in China with Apple. Huawei have come along and taken up most of their market in China.
Huawei.
Well, however you pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce
I
it. But
thought
you
it
all
was
know
Hawaii, but
Hawaii. Well,
I don't know
you
if
know
it's
who I'm
that.
talking about.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about. They've
It's
come along,
Huawei.
haven't they, with cheaper services. You know, Apple rested on the laurels for far too long. Apple. They've just thought, oh, everyone's going to buy the iPhone because everyone loves it, and eventually people get sick of paying like the prices that Apple charge for inferior products a lot of the time. And you know that company in China have come along and they said we can offer pretty much the same thing for cheaper, and it's like almost a revolution in China.
That's the thing
with
though,
that.
like
So
with phones, like Android and iOS, just going back to them two, they virtually do the same thing, but there are subtle differences.
yeah,
And that's what sways, the consumer. Which with gaming consoles, it's usually exclusives as the main subtle differences,
yeah,
isn't it? I mean, it's
definitely.
not that
I'd
subtle, I
say so.
guess, but that's something you want to keep, I believe.
Yeah, because
I just think it's for the better.
well, it's like when you go to it. If you've got all your friends already on that platform, it's obviously you're going to be more likely to choose that platform that you've been known. But if you're sort of say someone a neutral going in, you're going to look, say when the PS5 and Xbox whatever it's going to be called 2 or Xbox whatever comes out, you're going to look at that initial launch lineup of games and go, which one appeals more to me? I'm probably going to choose that one.
Yeah.
So games are important, clearly.